More than 2,000 years ago, in a quiet corner of the Roman Empire, a child was born not in a palace, but in a stable. His name was Jesus, and though the world did not notice it at first, history would one day turn around that birth. Born in Bethlehem, raised in Nazareth, Jesus came from humble beginnings. According to the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2-7, she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn. This was no accident. From the very beginning, his life would be marked by simplicity, suffering, and purpose. He wasn't born into power, wealth, or privilege, and yet, his teachings would shake empires. His words would outlast kingdoms, and his pain would change how billions understand life and eternity. What made him different wasn't just what he preached, it was how he lived. At a time when power ruled with swords and taxes, Jesus moved through villages with compassion and silence. He healed the sick, embraced the outcast, and spoke to the forgotten. According to the book of Matthew, chapter 5-3, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." He didn't just speak of love, he embodied it. He didn't just call for change, he lived it. And as the world began to notice him, so did those in power. But instead of bending to their will, Jesus kept walking his path, a path that would lead to pain, rejection, and eventually, the cross. This documentary is not about religion, it's about truth, about what we can learn from the man who carried a message so powerful. As Jesus grew into adulthood, his presence began to stir something deeper in the hearts of ordinary people. He wasn't just a carpenter's son anymore, he became a teacher, a healer, a voice that cut through centuries of silence. But his message, it wasn't always comfortable. According to the book of Matthew, chapter 10:34, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword." These weren't the words of a man seeking popularity. These were the words of someone revealing a deeper kind of truth, a truth that would challenge every system built on fear, greed, and division. Jesus walked among the poor, but he spoke to the powerful. He spent time with lepers, widows, tax collectors, those the world had discarded. And when others stayed silent, he stood up, not with violence, but with conviction. According to the book of John, chapter 8-7, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone." That one sentence silenced an angry crowd and saved a woman's life. Because Jesus didn't just preach mercy, he used it as a weapon against hate. But with every miracle and every truth he revealed, the resistance grew. The religious leaders felt threatened. The Roman rulers watched closely, because when a man with no army begins to gather thousands, fear spreads in high places. Still, Jesus didn't stop. He continued healing the blind, feeding the hungry, and forgiving the very people. The miracles were never about the crowd, they were about the message. When Jesus fed 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish, it wasn't just about food, it was about trust. When he walked on water, it was in tea. Just a display of power, it was a reminder that faith can carry us through any storm. According to the book of Matthew, chapter 14-27, "Take heart. It is, I do not be afraid." And yet fear remained in the hearts of rulers, priests, and even some followers. Because when someone lives with complete truth, it exposes everyone else's lies. Jesus didn't challenge governments with swords, he challenged them with integrity. He didn't overthrow temples, he overturned tables. According to the book of Matthew, chapter 21-13, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers." These were not soft words. They were fire in a system soaked in corruption. But what made Jesus unstoppable wasn't just what he said, it was how he carried the weight of rejection. He knew betrayal was coming. He saw the cross in the distance. Still, he washed the feet of the very man who would betray him. That's not weakness, that's divine strength. In a world obsessed with ego and control, Jesus lived with humility and surrender. He taught that greatness isn't about being served, it's about serving others. And that message shook the foundations of every throne built on pride. He was rewriting what it meant to be powerful, not through domination, but through sacrifice. Pain was never the end of the story. It was the beginning of the truth. Jesus didn't hide from suffering. He walked straight into it. Not because he wanted to die, but because he wanted to show us how to live. According to the book of Luke, chapter 22:42, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours. Be done." That moment wasn't weakness. It was the most honest cry in the history of humanity. A man burdened with the weight of every sin, still choosing obedience over escape. He was not forced onto the cross, he stepped toward it. The world mocked him. Soldiers laughed. A crown of thorns was twisted onto his head, not in honor, but in mockery. And yet, even then, he spoke of forgiveness. According to the book of Luke, chapter 23-34, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Who says that when they're being killed? Only someone whose love runs deeper than pain. Only someone who came to heal what was broken, not just in bodies, but in hearts, in systems, in all of us. Jesus wasn't just nailed to a wooden cross. He was pinned between 2 thieves, treated like a criminal, as the skies darkened and the earth trembled. And yet he didn't curse the world, he carried it. Because in that moment, he wasn't losing, he was redeeming. According to the book of John, chapter 19:30, it is finished. But what did Jesus mean when he said that? He didn't say I am finished. He said it is finished. This was not a cry of defeat. It was a declaration of victory. The pain, the humiliation, the betrayal, the nails in his hands, he endured it all. Not because he had to, but because love demanded it. This wasn't just the end of a man's life. It was the end of spiritual distance. The wall between heaven and earth was being torn down. At that exact moment, according to the book of Matthew, chapter 27 to 51, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, and the rocks split. Why is that important? Because that curtain represented separation between God and man, holiness and sin, heaven and human. And when Jesus gave his final breath, that separation ended. For the first time in history, access to the divine was no longer reserved for the high priest. It was now open for all. The cross was not just a death, it was an invitation. Not to religion, but to restoration. Not to rituals, but to relationship. Jesus didn't just pay a price. He rewrote the value of every soul. According to the book of Luke, chapter 23 to 34, Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Who says that while being crucified? Who speaks forgiveness while bleeding? It wasn't just the pain of nails or the weight of the cross. It was betrayal by friends, abandonment by followers, mockery by the very people he came to save. And still, he forgave. That one sentence changed everything. It shattered the idea that love is conditional. It redefined strength as the ability to show mercy when you have every right to withhold it. He wasn't just dying for people who loved him. He was dying for the ones who nailed him there. According to the book of Romans, chapter 5 to 8, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. This was not about earning love, it was about receiving it. And that kind of love, unshakable, undeserved, unwavering, is what continues to call people even today. Because if a man can forgive from the cross, then maybe forgiveness is stronger than power. Maybe grace is greater than revenge. And maybe real love is found in sacrifice, not in comfort. According to the book of John, chapter 19:30, Jesus said, "It is finished." 3 words, but they weren't words of defeat. They were a declaration, a thunderous cry that echoed through eternity. It didn't mean he was finished. It meant the mission was the pain, the sacrifice, the rejection, it all served a purpose. According to the book of Isaiah, chapter 53 to 5, he was pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him. This was not the end of a man. It was the beginning of a movement. For the disciples, it must have felt like the darkest moment. The one they followed was gone. The miracles stopped. The crowds dispersed. Hope seemed buried with him, but something unseen was already in motion. A crack in the system, a shift in the spiritual order. The silence of the tomb was not death's victory. It was the stillness before the storm of resurrection. And those 3 words, "It is finished," they didn't close the story. They opened it. According to the book of Matthew, chapter 28 to 6, he is not here. He has risen, just as he said. The stone was rolled away. The tomb was empty. And with that moment, history was split in 2 before and after. This wasn't just a return from death. It was a statement to the world. You can bury the body, but not the truth. You can silence the voice, but not the message. You can crucify the man, but not the movement. Jesus didn't rise in secret. He appeared to Mary, to his disciples, to those who doubted. And in each meeting, he brought peace, not revenge. According to the book of Luke, chapter 24 to 36, when he appeared, he said, "Peace be with you, not anger, not bitterness, peace." Because that's who he was. Even after betrayal, even after pain, even after death, he offered peace. That's the lesson. Not just that he conquered the grave, but how he returned with love. According to the book of John, chapter 20:29, Jesus said, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." This wasn't just a message to Thomas. It was a message to generations to come. To people like us who never walked beside him, who never heard his voice, yet feel his truth. Faith wasn't about proof. It was about presence. It was about trust in something deeper, something real even when unseen. He taught us that belief isn't built on miracles alone. It's built on choice. A daily decision to love, to forgive, to rise again no matter how many times we fall. And that's where his teachings become timeless. Not just for the people of Jerusalem, but for every human being who's ever felt lost, doubted their worth, or questioned their purpose. According to the book of Matthew, chapter 11:28, he said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." It wasn't a demand, it was an invitation. And it's still open today. According to the book of Luke, chapter 6:27, Jesus said, "Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you." Not just tolerate them, not just ignore them, but love them. This wasn't passive advice, it was radical. Because in a world built on revenge and pride, Jesus offered the epistic grace. He wasn't teaching weakness, he was revealing strength of the highest kind. The strength to let go, the strength to bless when cursed, the strength to forgive while bleeding. He showed us that power isn't about control, it's about compassion. He didn't come to overthrow Rome with armies. He came to overthrow hatred with mercy. And those who expected a sword, they didn't understand the kind of kingdom he was building, because this king didn't wear a crown of gold. He wore a crown of thorns. According to the book of John, chapter 13-14, Jesus said, "Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet." Think about that. The man they called Master, the one who healed the blind and raised the dead. He kneeled down and washed the feet of his followers. Dusty feet, calloused skin, the work of a servant. Why? Because he wasn't just teaching leadership, he was redefining it. In his world, true greatness didn't come from status, it came from service. From lowering yourself when you had every right to rise. That single act told a deeper story. If love doesn't lead to humility, it's not the kind of love he came to show. And when the disciples looked at him that night, they didn't just see their teacher anymore. They saw a man who embodied the very heart of God, gentle, powerful, and deeply human. According to the book of Luke, chapter 22-44, and being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. That's not just poetry, that's pain. Real, human, unbearable pain. In the Garden of Gethsemane, under the shadow of olive trees, Jesus knelt alone, not as a distant divine being, but as a man staring into the mouth of death. He knew what was coming, the betrayal, the thorns, the lashes, the cross, and still, he didn't run, he cried, he pleaded, he broke, but he didn't break his purpose. Because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's walking forward, even when your soul is shaken. And in that garden, Jesus didn't just pray for strength, he chose the cup of suffering. For a world that didn't yet understand what love truly costs. According to the book of Isaiah, chapter 53-5, "But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed." They mocked him with a crown of thorns, not knowing they were crowning the King of Mercy. They nailed his hands, but they couldn't chain his forgiveness. They raised a cross, thinking it would end him, but instead, it became the bridge between heaven and earth. This wasn't just execution, this was divine endurance. Jesus didn't resist because he was weak. He surrendered because that was the only way to save those who couldn't save themselves. In pain, he forgave. In agony, he loved. And as the sky grew dark and the earth trembled, he whispered, "It is finished." Not a cry of defeat, but a declaration that the debt of sin was paid in full. According to the book of John, chapter 19-41, "Now in the place where he was crucified there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb, in which no one had yet been laid. They laid his body in the tomb. The stone was rolled. The silence of death seemed final. For his followers, hope flickered. Was it over? Was everything he said just a dream? But what they didn't know was that silence doesn't mean absence, and death doesn't mean defeat. In that stillness, heaven was setting the stage for the greatest reversal in history. No army, no sword, no kingdom could do what was coming next. Because on the third day, before the sun rose, the stone rolled away, not with noise, but with power. The tomb was empty, and hope was alive. This wasn't just a miracle. It was a message to the world. You are not forgotten. Love has won. According to the book of Matthew, chapter 28-6, he is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come, see the place where the Lord lay. The resurrection wasn't just the end of a story. It was the beginning of a revolution. His return shattered fear. It shook the guards. It stirred the hearts of the broken, and it gave birth to a movement that would cross oceans, survive empires, and reach every corner of the world. But Jesus didn't come back for fame. He came back for you, to show that even after death, betrayal, or silence, your purpose is not over. He met Mary in her grief. He appeared to doubters. He walked with the confused, and he breathed peace into chaos. This was more than a comeback. It was the fulfillment of a promise that love never dies. It just rises again. According to the book of John, chapter 20-27, then he said to Thomas, "Reach your finger here, and look at my hands." Doubt wasn't denied, it was invited. Jesus didn't shame Thomas for questioning. He met him right at the point of uncertainty, with wounds still visible, with truth still gentle. This wasn't a lesson in blind faith. It was a lesson in honest faith, the kind that dares to ask, and still finds answers in love. He showed us that real belief doesn't always start with certainty. Sometimes, it starts with scars. And through that moment, the message became clear. Your doubts don't disqualify you. Your questions don't cancel your worth. Your past doesn't block your future. Because when you come close enough to see the wounds, you also come close enough to feel the love. According to the book of Luke, chapter 23-34, then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." These weren't words of anger. They were words of surrender, spoken not from comfort, but from the cross. He was bleeding, betrayed, broken, and still, he chose forgiveness. Not when it was easy, not when it made sense, but when the nails were still in his hands and the pain hadn't ended. This was the power of divine love, to offer grace even when grace wasn't deserved. to release others from the chains of guilt, even while he himself was chained to the cross. What kind of strength does it take to forgive like that? What kind of heart still chooses mercy when surrounded by cruelty? He didn't just preach forgiveness, he proved it when it cost everything. And in that moment, he redefined what it means to be strong, because real strength forgives. According to the book of John, chapter 19:30, so when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished." And bowing his head, he gave up his spirit. These were not words of defeat, they were a declaration, a statement that the mission was complete, that the suffering had a purpose, that the pain had meaning. He wasn't just dying, he was fulfilling something greater, something eternal. Every moment of rejection, every drop of blood, every step he took carrying that cross, it all led to this. He didn't cry out in despair, he spoke with clarity, with resolve, because he knew that even death wasn't the end. The world saw a man breathing his last breath, but heaven saw a door being opened. A door for redemption, a door for rebirth, and through his final breath, he gave life to millions. According to the book of Matthew, chapter 28-6, he is not here, for he is risen. As he said, the stone wasn't just rolled away from a tomb, it was rolled away from the hearts of millions. In that quiet, powerful moment, everything changed. The guards stood frozen, the earth had shaken, and the impossible became reality. Jesus had defeated death, not with armies, not with violence, but with faith, obedience, and love. The resurrection wasn't just proof of divine power, it was a message whispered across time. That light conquers darkness, that purpose overcomes pain, that the end can become a beginning. He rose not to show off, he rose to show us that no matter how deep the grave, hope always has the last word. According to the book of John, chapter 20-21, as the Father has sent me, I also send you. His mission didn't end at the resurrection, it expanded. Jesus wasn't calling for admiration, he was calling for action. He passed the torch. 2 fishermen, tax collectors, doubters, and the broken. People like us. He didn't ask for perfection. He asked for courage. He didn't demand rituals. He asked for love, and he left behind a truth no empire could silence, that the kingdom of God isn't built on gold or power, but on faith, humility, and service. What Jesus started didn't stay in one city. It spread across continents, languages, and generations, because pain had a purpose, and love had a voice. And that voice still speaks to anyone willing to listen.